Sport Karate Radio. Sport Karate Radio. Growing the sport of sport karate. Tune in each week for episodes with special guests as we discuss sport karate. Sport karate.
It is time for some tournaments coming up in everybody's area, and we're going to start with Corey. Corey, what do you have coming up in your area for tournaments?
Hey, Bobby. So I got two local tournaments this month coming up. So first off, this weekend, I have the Battle of the Badger State. That's Infinity Martial Arts local tournament. They're doing it in Middleton, Wisconsin. They have all their flyers and stuff online. Check them out on Facebook. They have a lot of information out there. And then my tournament is coming up the following weekend on November 12th, and that's going to be at Nicolay High School here in Glendale, Wisconsin. So we're pretty excited getting those registrations rolling in, and it's going to be a blast and a great time.
And Richard, you got some tournaments coming up that are NASCA rated, correct?
Yeah, we've got towards the end of the year to kind of wrap up the fiscal year of the calendar. You've got the Pan Am Internationals hosted by the Reyes family down in beautiful Miami Beach, November 17th and 18th. There in Miami. Great tournament. Kind of ends the NASCA year down there with a bang. Great venue, great weather. And then most people are going to hop on a flight, which we already know that's going to happen with one of our guests. We're going to hop on a flight and then go up on Sunday to go to the KTOC Nationals up in New York, in Flushing, New York, on November 19th, which is a Sunday tournament, which is not uncommon in our sport karate world. There's a lot of Sunday tournaments, so what a great weekend to kind of end the year. So November 19th will be the KTOC Nationals there on Sunday. I know a lot of people are going to be back and forth on flights, and a heck of a way to end the year there on the East Coast.
And Erin, Richard was kind of referring to you in that whole statement because you're hitting up both tournaments in one weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm planning first. I have WKC World Championships for a week. Then I'm going to come home that Saturday, attend the Crane Nationals, the last leg of the Triple Crown tournaments on Sunday. And then the next weekend, I believe the 16th, 17th, 18th, I'm going to the Pan Am Internationals in Miami. And then I'm going to come home really early Sunday morning and come to the KTOC Nationals in New York. So 4 tournaments, 2 weekends.
Kind of a big week for sport karate in general here. But as always, you guys can check out the tournaments coming up in your area at sportkarateradio.com. And moving on, we have our hot topic of the week, and this is going to be a awesome episode because not only do you have all 3 guests or 3 hosts for our show, but we also have 3 women on the show that are going to kind of take over the show for us and talk about forms and sparring.
We at Century Martial Arts believe that martial arts is more than a business. It's a way of life, and it's a life that we've been living for more than 40 years. Give us a call today at 1-800-626-2787 or visit us at centurymartialarts.com.
Have you ever thought about revolutionizing your martial arts business and positioning yourself as an authority in your community? Head over to our spycombatives.com to see how our spy secrets can save your life and boost your bottom line. Former CIA officer Jason Hansen is giving a free training manual, www.spycombatives.com. Head over there today to reserve your copy.
Sport Karate Radio. Sport Karate Radio. Growing the sport of sport karate.
All right, so our first hot topic of this week is going to be pretty much just whatever these girls want to talk about, but I'm going to get the ball rolling here, and we are going to talk about the women's divisions. The women's divisions within NASCA, NBL, whatever tournaments you want to talk about, or whatever leagues you want to talk about. Erin and Darci, what do you guys think about the divisions as far as women go compared to the men's? Are they more filled? Are they more competitive compared to the men's divisions? What are you guys' opinions on that?
If we're talking traditional kata or traditional forms, I would say the men's divisions are much more competitive. Not knocking on girls at all, because of course I am in the girls division or women's division, but I just feel like the men have a whole different level of competition.
I haven't done traditional kata personally this season, so I will definitely leave that to Darci. But in terms of the CMX weapons divisions and traditional weapons divisions that I'm in, they're definitely smaller than the men. Depending on the division, it's not always less competitive. You have Melissa from Canada, who's very talented, Sammy Smith, Mackenzie Emery. There's definitely a lot of talent, but just the numbers aren't there that they have in the men's division, and obviously a lot of really talented men as well.
So, Darci, you compete in a couple of different leagues. You compete in NASCA, two other different leagues, one being the WKC, correct? And another one?
I'm in USA NKF.
Okay, so what do you see within that league compared to NASCA that you like or you don't like, or the differences?
There are a lot of differences between the two. One being the USA NKF. They're very strict with everything. They have a lot of little details that if you don't follow by the rules, then you'll get disqualified from the round, or you'll get disqualified from the entire division. Like NASCA, I don't think you can, but for bowing in, you have to bow in specifically for USNKF like 3 different times before you do your kata in the right places, otherwise you get disqualified. And for NASCA, it's really not. I mean, you can walk in anywhere for NASCA. And for the NASCA forms, you don't have to, for traditional kata, you don't really have to have any specific form. They can all be altered or non-traditional.
Hey, Darci, just in looking at both organizations, a lot of people talk about the WKF, as far as the World League goes, and we know that there's a lot of top talent in NASCA. But as far as the professionalism of each circuit, and again, not to knock NASCAR or anything like that, but is there a whole new level as far as professionalism on how those events are ran? Do you think that we on the open circuit side maybe have a little bit of lack of professionalism that kind of separates us from there? Again, not trying to knock the open circuit, but is there a big contrast as far as how those tournaments operate and how things are ran? That's something we can maybe emulate or do more in the open side of things?
Yeah, I think that some of the tournaments, NASCA circuits, I think they should adopt some of the WKF style, like as far as scoring, and they seem to be more professional. For WKF, there are a certain number of rings, and then any spectators, they're not allowed to go inside of there.
That's okay. So one of the things that we've talked about previous episodes, and possibly more recently, I've been gone for a bit, so apologies everyone, is kind of the judging and keeping consistent judging across the board. And is the judging done in NASCA, not to knock either one or say one's better than the other, but just like the differences? What are some of the differences between like the NASCA judging you've seen and like the USA NKF judging that you've seen?
Well, to start off with, there's going to be biased judges everywhere, so I'm not going to say that NASCA judges are always biased, because it doesn't matter where you go. You're going to have some, specific opinions that people and preferences. But I think that as far as judging goes, they are much stricter in WKF, and they pay attention to a lot of the little details. That way, they set the bar kind of high for everybody. And NASCA, there's a lot of loopholes and things you can just go around to avoid the rules.
So, Erin, where do you compete, and is it just forms that you're doing, or is it weapons, or is it sparring? What are you doing within the league that you're competing in right now?
Yeah, so I compete in WKU, WKC, and Crane and NASCA. I compete creative or open weapons, musical weapons, traditional weapons, and point fighting.
Hey, Erin, just to follow up a little bit, when we was talking about the numbers and stuff like that, you've been out, you were a junior not too long ago, and now you're out in the adult circuit. Do you feel like, as far as the women division size-wise, do you feel like the numbers are declining? Do you Have you seen a spike in numbers where you're seeing more, or which direction have you seen the divisions kind of go now as you transition from junior to adult?
Yeah, so far this year, it's been Chicago and AKAs was definitely some really, really big divisions. Amerikick and Philly also had big divisions, and then Diamonds this past weekend, or not this past weekend, this past month, had some really big women's divisions as well. Other than that, it kind of depends. Usually, the middleweight point fighting divisions tend to be smaller, so that's definitely tough. I know in the past, like Dixielands, for example, there were only two women fighters like through the whole tournament, and so fighting's always been a hard thing. Getting the numbers up, forms and weapons. It honestly seems to depend on the division. Like the traditional, say, Japanese or Korean divisions tend to be bigger, and then things like creative weapons, musical weapons tend to be a little smaller and a little more specialized, and you start to see the same people, not always doing the same stuff, but the same group of people, I should say.
So do you plan on going to events based off of your last year's experience? Like Dixieland this year, you only had two competitors in this division. So next year you may skip that one and go to a different tournament and see if there's more people in that division? Or how do you plan out your whole year for where you're competing?
Honestly, sometimes I decide last minute, which is not great, but I think definitely like Dixieland's, for example, like besides the numbers, I think it was still a pretty well run tournament and a lot of good competition in weapons divisions. I think for me as a competitor, it's also important to be like a good example for younger girls who are coming up, and so that even if you don't have a bunch of competition that day or whatever happens based on the numbers, that they still see that there's women who are out there who are competing, and then that they'll stick with it. Not that that's the only way that I decide what tournaments to go to, but that's definitely something that's important to me as well, regardless of what the numbers are.
So Gina, you're kind of on a different platform compared to both Darci and Erin because you're on a national team, Team Paul Mitchell. What tournaments are you asked to go to or that you're required to go to and compete at?
Well, Paul Mitchell has a set schedule, and so we definitely try to hit those team tournaments. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way because I didn't hit a couple of the starting off team tournaments. But then for me personally, if I'm able to, as far as my job and everything else, if I can work it out, I try to get to more tournaments just so I can kind of stay active out on the tournament circuit. Because Paul Mitchell they don't do as many tournaments. They just kind of set up, maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 tournaments a year. It just depends on, what's going on when.
So are you also competing in regional tournaments and going to regional events and stuff like that, even though Paul Mitchell doesn't tell you, hey, you need to be at this event and compete at this event or whatever like that?
I do try and stay active as much as I can. There are regional and local tournaments around here where I am, but there's no women fighting. So typically, if there is somebody there that, I feel like, okay, it's so I can get in the ring and move around, I will do it. But most of the time there's not. So it just depends on the day of, because I have a group of kids that I train and I take out to tournaments, that's where my focus is. But if there's like a couple women there and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to get in the ring, I will. It just depends. In this area, there's not a lot of women.
We saw you at the North Carolina Open and you ended up getting in the ring there and winning your division. But more importantly, we saw you rooting and cheering and jumping up and down and helping all these kids out and everything like we talked about previously. For all of these kids that were competing in the black belt division, the junior black belts, man, those guys were just on fire. Yeah. So it's great to see a national brand, Team Paul Mitchell, with you being a member of that, still at a regional tournament, less than 1,000 competitors or less than 500 competitors, still helping all those guys out. So that's just awesome to see.
Thank you. Definitely. I have my kids that, this year they've really gotten out there. There's some that have hit a couple of NASCAR tournaments and some haven't, but they've definitely been doing regionals and they're doing WKC this year. So I'm just trying to get out there, but definitely when I go to some of these small tournaments, it's all about them. It's never really about me. So, if I decide to do something, that's fine, but the kids come first.
I got a couple questions for you. Well, one main one. Now, you've been doing this for a while. I mean, you've got to see both sides of the spectrum. You've got to see NBL. You've got to see NASCA. And we kind of posed this question to Erin on the NASCA side. And Darci, when we talked about the women's form side on the traditional side. But as far as like the open circuit, I mean, where are you seeing as far as like the numbers on the women's side? And we're talking about fighting with you, and I know you've been doing this for a while. So, I mean, has it just been a up and down scale as far as fighting goes?
I started out with NBL, and it had, around in this area didn't have a lot of women, but it had a few women. Then when I would go to Super Grands, there'd be a good number of women, but then all of a sudden it was like I'm still fighting the same one or two girls that I go to in the NBL tournament. So I started getting bored. I mean, I didn't want to just go get a trophy for fighting the same two girls. I always fight every other weekend or whatever it was. So then we started looking at the NASCA circuit, where a lot of females were. So, I mean, the first time I went to the U.S. Open, I lined up for the super lightweight, and the ring was wrapped with women. I couldn't believe it, me coming from NBL. So, and I think that it has had more numbers as far as NASCA goes for women. It has declined a little bit, but females, it's different for females. Life happens, guys get in the picture. There's other things that come around, jobs, houses, cars, the whole 9 yards. So it's different for females, and it's hard for women to stay committed if you're still fighting the same one person. I mean, don't get me wrong, I want to get out there and fight as many people as I can. If I lose, I lose, but I had that chance. I am not the one that just wants to go up there and walk up and get a trophy. And that's just not my interest. So I try and go where people are going to be, and as far as me before I got on Paul Mitchell, and it was like I had to get out there because I wanted to fight as many females as I could. So it's just my agenda and my goal is different. I never wanted to be that one, but NASCA still right now has more females than NBL. And I've talked to a couple of females that are still kind of sticking around the NBL to try and, try out some of the NASCA tournaments. I got one of them, like Mihaela Keller. She came to U.S. Open. So that was probably her first NASCA tournament. So, I mean, it's hard to say for women. There's not as many right now, I don't think. But, you do have those juniors that are coming up, but you just don't know who will stick around.
That's kind of where I was going to go that next, because you mentioned some dedication. I know that Erin and Darci also mentioned that, the divisions aren't as big, but then we've also all talked about those juniors that are coming up and how those divisions are really killing it. And do you think, like, in the next 10 years, is there going to be, like, kind of this radical shift in kind of, women's divisions or just in how these tournaments run?
It's hard to say, I know, like, WACO is starting to do something here in the States where they're going to have their certain regions, and then you're going to kind of have, I'm assuming, like what NBL has, where you have a Super Grands at the end of the year. I mean, there's so many leagues, and one thing about tournaments is that they're expensive, because you got to think, you got the training, but you got to travel. Some people travel to train. You're trying to get to a tournament, you got hotel, you got entry fee, food. I mean, so it's expensive. So, some people, try and plan out, okay, what can we do? And they can't get to everything. There was like 2.5 years, maybe 3, that I tried to hit everything because I had a goal. Now, I probably put myself out a little bit, but that was because there was one goal I wanted to get on a top team. So, that's what I did. But, it just depends on the juniors coming up. Will they stick around? Because sometimes some of them come up, but then they go to college. And, I know that, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Jarvis Miller. He was on Team Full Circle, and he kind of graduated high school, and I think now he goes to Penn State. And he plays for the football team. I mean, so things happen. So, I mean, you kind of put karate on the back burner to be, a football player at Penn State, which is great for him. I mean, life happens. That's the thing. You don't know if juniors are going to stick around because they're graduating high school. They have, in mind, they might want to be a lawyer, or a doctor. And they may come back around after that, but, you know, school is very important. So it's just hard to say with the juniors coming up, and then, you know, some of the adults, they'll, you know, like Chelsea. I mean, you get to a point, you've competed so long, and then, you know, enough is enough. Let's just be on the coaching side, or, you know, let's just kind of step away from the scene for a while.
You know, and Gina, you mentioned something about so many leagues and everything like that. Rich, you want to say that word, man?
Unity. You gotta find it in this sport.
Right.
You gotta find it.
That's the word of the week, unity. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to hear from Darci, Erin, and Gina about what needs to happen from the sport in order for it to grow.
Head over to SpyCombatives.com to see how our spy secrets can save your life and boost your bottom line. Former CIA officer Jason Hansen is giving away a free technical manual at SpyCombatives.com.
Attention martial arts instructors. Get the greatest gear for your studio in one place at CenturyMartialArts.com. Century is the go-to source for everything your students need to take them to the next level. Call one of our team members today at 1-800-626-2787 and find out about our wholesale pricing and other discounts for your school. That means you can get the lowest prices on the best gear, but only if you shop at CenturyMartialArts.com.
Erin, is there anything that Sport Karate can do to get more women in the fighting divisions or the weapons divisions or form divisions? What's your opinion on the sport as it is right now?
I think definitely it's an issue. The numbers are an issue. I think it's important. As you said, a lot of juniors don't keep going. The junior girls divisions, as of right now, are really strong. There's a lot of really strong competitors. The girls divisions across formed weapons and fighting. I think it's important for them to see that like they can have a future in the sport, and to see people who are in the adult divisions who maybe have, you know, jobs and have go to college, things like that, to see that like they can make it happen and they don't have to just do one thing. They can if they want to, but that if you really want to make it happen, like you'll find the way. And then I also think specifically for girls, it's important for girls coming up to see a lot of strong female like role models in the forms and weapons fighting divisions across the board, way they can see like someone that they want to be like, even not necessarily younger girls, but of all ages, just to see that like there's a future there. And as Gina touched upon, like it won't be just fighting the same person all the time. Like they can have people that they can see, you know, look at like I want to be like them.
And like we said earlier in the show, Erin, you are kind of like a well-rounded competitor. You're not just doing forms. You're also doing weapons. You're also doing sparring and everything like that. So you're kind of like a role model in a lot of these younger kids' mind that they can kind of look up to when they're your age, which, how old are you, Erin?
I'm 18.
So when they're 18, that's, you know, maybe they want to be a young Erin Smith. Or maybe they want to be a young Darci York, or maybe they want to be a young Gina Thornton, or anything like that. So, you know, that was one of the reasons that we picked, both me, Corey, and Richard picked you guys to be on the show, because we definitely think that all three of you ladies are incredibly huge role models within the sport that all these young ladies can strive to be and everything like that. You know, especially you, Erin, with not just competing in the open hand forms, or the weapons division, or the musical division, or the sparring, but you're well-rounded in everything. So all of these ladies, I'm sure, will be looking up to you, wanting to be a young Erin. So hopefully that happens for a lot of these young ladies. And you're a great influence on all these young girls coming up throughout the sport.
Well, that's like crazy to me still, because there's so many people who I still look up to. So thank you, sir. I really appreciate that.
Darci, where do you think the sport is right now?
Oh, I'm really excited. Well, right now, I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know, everyone's trying to transition over because the Olympics is now a big thing, and everyone's getting introduced to that. So I feel like in the future, we're going to have a lot more sport karate people transitioning to WKF, or for the traditional side, of course. And I see them pursuing the Olympics, which is exciting because that means competition for the sport karate. That means it's going to come up even more for the forms divisions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good things that competitors can learn from kind of those two different circuits. They're incredibly different, like we talked about a little bit earlier. But I think there's really good things that we can all kind of learn by, mixing and transitioning. And I'm just, as you said, excited to see that happen and see where we go and how it's kind of adapted into our more traditional, or not our more traditional, but our current sport karate competitions, and kind of watch it grow. And that is something that I'm also incredibly excited for. And so, yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Darci, what are you competing in right now? Is it just traditional forms?
Yeah, I've been doing traditional challenge and traditional forms.
And only in NASCA and the USAW, what is it?
It's USA and KF and NASCA, yeah.
Okay, and how have you been doing compared to the US or the USA divisions and the NASCA events? What is the comparison between the two? How have you been doing between the two events?
Honestly, they're two completely different things. It's difficult to compare them because I can do the exact same kata or form for WKF, and I can place in top 5, and then I can take it to NASCA, and depending on my placement, it usually just varies. I don't do very well in NASCA anymore, so I've been because of the transition over to WKF, because I found that the more traditional the form looks, the less the NASCA judges like it. I mean, maybe that's just my luck, but that's how it seems.
So with you competing in these two different leagues continuously throughout the year, what do you think the sport needs to do in general in order to grow as a sport? Sport karate needs to do what as a whole in order to grow?
Maybe they should tighten up the regulations and make it a little harder as far as the forms. Like maybe like traditional challenge, if you call it traditional forms, make it a traditional forms division by making the competitors do actually traditional forms, and then having a different division with forms that are, I don't know, non-traditional.
And Gina, you're competing in only NASCA events, correct?
No, I try to hit everything I can. Just depends on the schedule. So, I'll still do NBL, WKC, NASCA. I've done WACO before. It just depends on the schedule, what I can get to, what I want the kids to do. So it just depends. I try and do everything, so nobody could ever say that I do anything.
So with you competing at all of these different events across the board here, what do you think sport karate needs to do in order for the sport as a whole to grow?
That I think one of the things is we're just so spread out. We have so many different leagues coming through the United States, where some of your countries, like that, only hit maybe 1, maybe 2, where their government kind of gets involved and helps them far as sponsorship and things, and we just don't have that in the United States. Yeah, we have some teams that are sponsored, but not a lot of them are really fully sponsored. A lot of people just wear a uniform. So I think that there's so many leagues, and people kind of only stick to this or stick to that. I think that if we could just, you have a USA team for WKC, you have a USA team for WACO, a USA team for WKU, a USA team for WKA. I mean, it's just so we can never really get help from the government or anything, because we don't have one set league that we follow as far as our country, if that makes any sense. The different leagues is nice. You may see different competitors, you may not. It just depends on the areas, though. There, you can hit a local tournament in New York and get a good crowd and get $500 for grand. So if I did that every weekend, $500 here, $500 here, I mean, it's pretty nice. But then if you come to Virginia, you may get $150 for grand, maybe. But, I mean, so it's different depending on where you are in the United States.
Well said by all three of our special guests. This is a Woman Takeover Sport Karate Radio edition with Erin Smith, Darci York, and Gina Thornton. Thank you guys for tuning in. This episode of Sport Karate Radio is brought to you by the following sponsors.
At Century, you're never a number. You're part of our family. We pride ourselves on offering high-quality equipment to help schools grow at a price they can afford. That's what made us the industry leader in martial arts supplies for more than 40 years. Check out our website at centurymartialarts.com to see our ever-expanding inventory, or call and talk with one of our team members today about joining the Century family at 1-800-626-2787.
Have you ever thought about revolutionizing your martial arts business and positioning yourself as an authority in your community? Head over to our spycombatives.com to see how our spy secrets can save your life and boost your bottom line. Former CIA officer Jason Hansen is giving a free training manual, www.spycombatives.com. Head over there today to reserve your copy.
Sport Karate Radio. Sport Karate Radio. Growing the sport of sport karate. Tune in each week for episodes with special guests as we discuss sport karate. Sport karate.